The neon sign of Tony's Diner buzzed and flickered against the Arizona desert sky, casting pink and blue shadows across the empty parking lot. Lucy Martinez wiped down the same table for the third time, watching tumbleweeds roll past the window like lazy ghosts. 3 in the morning was always the loneliest hour at the truck stop, when even the most dedicated night owls had given up and gone home. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and glanced at the clock above the coffee machine. 2 more hours until her shift ended, and she could drive back to her tiny apartment near the university. Art school was expensive, and the late-night tips from truckers and insomniacs helped pay for paint and canvas. Most nights, she used the quiet time to sketch in her notebook, drawing the faces of sleepy travelers and the desert landscape beyond the windows. The bell above the door chimed, breaking the silence. Lucy looked up from her cleaning to see 3 small figures shuffling through the entrance. They wore oversized hooded sweatshirts that hung loose on their tiny frames, and they moved with careful, deliberate steps. Children, she assumed, though it was odd to see kids out so late without parents. "Welcome to Tony's," Lucy called out, grabbing 3 menus from behind the counter. "You can sit anywhere you like." The 3 figures chose a corner booth, sliding across the worn vinyl seats with surprising grace. Up close, Lucy noticed their hands were unusually pale and smooth, almost like polished stone. They kept their hoods pulled low over their faces, speaking to each other in soft whispers that sounded like gentle clicking noises. "What can I get you folks to drink?" Lucy asked, setting the menus down. She tried to catch a glimpse of their faces, but the shadows of their hoods hid everything except the faint glimmer of what might have been very bright eyes. The smallest of the 3 pointed at the kids' menu with one delicate finger. The motion was precise, almost ritualistic. Then all 3 of them made the same clicking sound, which Lucy interpreted as agreement. "The kids' menu, sure," she said, even though something felt strange about the whole situation. "Are your parents coming to join you?" More clicking, but no clear answer. The tallest one reached into its sweatshirt pocket and pulled out 3 perfectly round coins. They gleamed like silver but felt warm when Lucy touched them. She had never seen currency quite like these, but when she held them, her mind somehow understood they were the exact amount needed for 3 kids' meals. "Okay, what would you like to eat?" All 3 pointed at the same item: macaroni and cheese. Simple, basic, the kind of comfort food that cost $4 and came from a box. Lucy had made thousands of servings during her 2 years at the diner, and it was never anything special. Just pasta, cheese sauce, and a sprinkle of breadcrumbs on top. 3 mac and cheese coming right up, she said, tucking the strange coins into her apron pocket. In the kitchen, Lucy boiled the pasta and heated the cheese sauce just like always. But something made her pause as she stirred the pot. These customers seemed different, more focused than the usual late-night crowd. She found herself paying extra attention to the cooking, making sure the pasta was perfectly tender and the cheese sauce smooth and creamy. She plated the 3 servings carefully, adding a small garnish of parsley that she usually skipped. When she carried the plates to the booth, the 3 figures straightened up with obvious excitement. They examined the food with intense concentration, leaning forward to study every detail. Lucy watched in fascination as they ate. Each bite was deliberate and thoughtful, like they were analyzing every flavor. They made soft humming sounds between mouthfuls and occasionally exchanged quick bursts of their clicking language. One of them pulled out what looked like a small crystal tablet and made notes with a tool that glowed faintly blue. "Is everything okay with the food?" Lucy asked. "You seem really focused on it." The tallest one looked up, and for just a moment Lucy caught sight of its face in the diner's fluorescent light. The skin was smooth and scaled, with a subtle iridescent quality that shifted between green and gold. The eyes were large and bright amber, with pupils that seemed to dilate and contract independent of the light. Lucy blinked, certain she had imagined it. When she looked again, the hood was pulled low once more, hiding everything in shadow. But her heart was beating faster, and she felt a strange tingling in her fingertips where she had touched the warm coins. The 3 finished their meal in complete silence, scraping every last bit of cheese sauce from their plates. Then the smallest one reached into its pocket and pulled out more of the strange coins, far more than necessary for a tip. The pile of silver discs gleamed on the table, worth at least $50 by Lucy's quick calculation. "Oh, you don't need to tip that much," Lucy protested, but the 3 were already sliding out of the booth. They moved toward the door with the same careful grace they had shown when entering, pausing only to nod politely in her direction. "Wait," Lucy called after them, but the door had already swung shut. Through the window, she watched them walk into the desert darkness, their small forms disappearing into the night as if they had never been there at all. Lucy cleared their table, stacking the empty plates and wiping down the surface. The coins were real enough, warm and solid in her palm. She studied them under the light, noting intricate designs that seemed to shift and change when she tilted them. Definitely not any Earth currency she recognized, but the register had accepted them without question. She spent the rest of her shift thinking about the strange encounter. The scaled skin, the amber eyes, the careful way they had analyzed her simple macaroni and cheese. By the time dawn broke over the desert, she had almost convinced herself it had been a dream brought on by too much late-night coffee and not enough sleep. But the coins in her pocket were real, and so was the memory of those bright, intelligent eyes studying her cooking with such intense interest. Something told her this was only the beginning of a much larger mystery. Lucy found herself watching the clock more carefully during her next few shifts, wondering if the strange trio would return. She had almost convinced herself the whole encounter was some kind of stress-induced hallucination when the bell chimed at exactly 3 in the morning. 1 week later, they entered just as before, 3 small hooded figures moving with that same peculiar grace. This time Lucy was ready for them. She had spent the week researching unusual coins online and asking her co-workers about strange customers, but no one had seen anything like what she described. "Back for more mac and cheese?" she asked as they settled into the same corner booth. This time she tried to sound casual, like serving potentially non-human customers was just another part of her job. The clicking conversation that followed seemed more animated than before. The tallest one pointed at the menu, then at the kitchen, then made a series of complex gestures that Lucy couldn't interpret. Finally, the smallest pulled out the familiar crystal tablet and showed her what appeared to be a crude drawing of a pasta bowl with question marks around it. "You want to know about the recipe?" Lucy guessed, more excited clicking. "Well, it's just regular macaroni and cheese. Nothing fancy about it." But as she prepared their order, Lucy found herself thinking more carefully about each step. She tested the pasta for doneness, adjusted the heat under the cheese sauce, and even added a pinch of black pepper that wasn't part of the standard recipe. Something about their obvious enthusiasm made her want to do better. When she served the plates, the 3 examined the food even more intently than before. They took small, careful bites, pausing between each one to make notes on their tablets. The middle-sized one pulled back its hood slightly, revealing more of that strange scaled skin and a delicate nose that twitched as it analyzed the aroma. Lucy pretended to clean nearby tables while watching them eat. She noticed they had a ritual of sorts. First, they would smell the food deeply, then take a tiny taste, then make their clicking sounds while writing on their tablets. Each bite was an event, treated with scientific precision. "Is there something special you're looking for?" she asked, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. The 3 exchanged rapid clicks. Then the tallest one gestured toward the kitchen again. It pulled out its tablet and showed Lucy a new drawing, a simple face with a smile, followed by symbols that might have been hearts or stars. "You're studying how the food makes people feel?" Lucy interpreted. More excited clicking confirmed her guess. "That's actually kind of beautiful. Most people just eat to fill their stomachs." Over the following weeks, the trio became regular customers. They arrived at exactly 3 every Tuesday and Friday, always ordering the same thing, always paying with those mysterious warm coins. Lucy began to look forward to their visits, finding herself experimenting with small changes to the recipe. One night, she tried adding a blend of 3 different cheeses instead of the usual processed cheese sauce. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. All 3 creatures made synchronized humming sounds and their clicking became rapid and excited. The smallest one actually pulled back its hood enough for Lucy to see its face clearly. The features were delicate and distinctly non-human, with large amber eyes set in a narrow face covered in fine scales that shimmered like oil on water. The nose was small and upturned, and when it smiled, Lucy caught a glimpse of tiny pearl-like teeth. But despite the alien features, the expression was unmistakably one of joy and appreciation. "You liked that version better," Lucy said, and the creature nodded enthusiastically before quickly pulling its hood back up. The next visit, Lucy tried adding fresh herbs she had grown on her apartment windowsill. The response was equally positive. She began to understand that these weren't just customers, they were students, learning something important from her simple diner food. She started keeping a notebook of her own, documenting which variations they preferred and how they reacted to different ingredients. When she added roasted garlic, they made soft trilling sounds. Fresh thyme earned her excited clicking. A dash of nutmeg in the cheese sauce resulted in what could only be described as alien purring. "You're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you," Lucy told them one night as she cleared their plates. The tallest one tilted its head in what she had learned was a gesture of curiosity. "I've been cooking this same dish for 2 years, but I never really paid attention to how each ingredient affects the whole thing. You're making me a better cook." During their 6th visit, something unexpected happened. As Lucy was refilling their water glasses, the smallest creature accidentally knocked over its cup. Ice water spread across the table, and Lucy quickly reached over with a towel to clean it up. In the process, her hand brushed against the creature's fingers. The moment their skin touched, Lucy's world exploded into images and sensations she couldn't possibly understand. She saw vast ships sailing between stars, their hulls shaped like enormous kitchen utensils. She witnessed beings from dozens of different species gathered around tables, sharing meals that glowed with their own internal light. She felt the weight of ancient traditions and the excitement of discovery, all centered around the simple act of preparing and sharing food. The visions lasted only a second, but they left Lucy gasping and disoriented. The 3 creatures were staring at her with obvious concern, their hoods thrown back in their alarm. For the first time, she could see all their faces clearly. Scaled, elegant, definitely not human, but filled with an intelligence and kindness that transcended species. "What was that?" Lucy whispered, sinking into the booth across from them. "What did you show me?" The tallest one reached out slowly, palm up, offering her the choice to touch again. Lucy hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand in its grasp. This time the images came more gently, organized and easier to understand. She saw herself through their eyes, a young human woman with an unusual gift for infusing emotion into simple food. She understood that they had been searching for something specific, something they called heart fire in her rough translation of their concept. Most species could create nutritious food, even tasty food, but very few could cook with the kind of caring intention that made a simple meal into an act of love. When the vision ended, Lucy found tears running down her cheeks. The 3 creatures, she could no longer think of them as children or even as entirely alien, watched her with patient concern. "You've been testing human food," she said, and they nodded. "Looking for something special, and somehow my macaroni and cheese has what you're looking for." More nodding, along with gentle clicking that sounded almost like encouragement. The smallest one pulled out its tablet and showed her a new drawing. Earth surrounded by other planets, all connected by lines that looked like streams of light. Lucy stared at the image, beginning to understand the scope of what she had stumbled into. These weren't just alien tourists sampling Earth cuisine. They were scouts, ambassadors, representatives of something much larger than she had imagined. "You want me to know more," she said, "about where you come from, what you're really doing here." The tallest one nodded and pointed toward the window, then made a gesture that clearly meant outside. Lucy looked through the glass at the empty parking lot, but now she noticed something she had missed before. A food truck parked at the far edge of the lot, its cheerful colors and normal appearance suddenly seeming like the perfect disguise. "Tomorrow night?" she asked, and they nodded in unison. As they prepared to leave, the smallest one touched her hand one more time, sending a brief image of gratitude and excitement. Lucy understood that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't begin to imagine, all because she had learned to cook with her heart instead of just her hands. Lucy spent the entire day thinking about the food truck in the parking lot, trying to convince herself she wasn't losing her mind. She had touched an alien's hand and seen visions of cosmic cooking adventures. Either she was having some kind of breakdown, or her life had just taken the most bizarre turn imaginable. When she arrived for her shift that evening, the food truck was still there, looking perfectly ordinary except for the fact that no one ever seemed to approach it. Other customers walked past it without giving it a second glance, as if it was invisible to everyone except her. The 3 creatures arrived at their usual time, but tonight they seemed different. more excited, more purposeful in their movements. Instead of their usual hooded sweatshirts, they wore what looked like chef's coats made from fabric that shifted color in the diner's fluorescent light. "No mac and cheese tonight?" Lucy asked as she approached their table. The tallest one, who she had started thinking of as their leader, shook its head and gestured toward the door. It pulled out its crystal tablet and showed her a new image, Lucy herself, standing inside what appeared to be a kitchen unlike anything she had ever seen. "You want to show me something?" she said, and all three nodded eagerly. Lucy looked around the empty diner. Her manager had left an hour ago, and no other customers were expected until the morning truckers started rolling in. She had never abandoned her post before, but these circumstances were hardly normal. "Okay," she said, untying her apron, "but if I get fired for this, you're giving me a job reference." The smallest one made a sound that might have been laughter, a musical trill that made Lucy smile despite her nervousness. They led her across the parking lot to the food truck, which looked even more ordinary up close. Faded paint advertised fresh tacos and burritos, and the license plate was from New Mexico. But when the tallest creature placed its hand on the door handle, Lucy heard a soft chiming sound and the entire truck seemed to shimmer like a mirage. The door swung open to reveal an interior that was definitely not designed for making tacos. The space inside was 3 times larger than the truck's exterior should have allowed, filled with cooking equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Surfaces gleamed with their own soft light, and the air hummed with gentle energy. Ingredients lined the walls in containers that seemed to float without support, each one labeled with symbols that shifted and changed as Lucy watched. "This is impossible," she whispered, stepping inside on shaking legs. The middle-sized creature touched her shoulder gently and sent her a brief image. The truck was disguised using technology that made it appear normal to anyone who wasn't meant to see its true nature. To most humans, it would always look like a simple food truck. Only those with the potential for heart-fire cooking could perceive what it really was. "You've been testing humans," Lucy said, understanding flooding through her. "Not just their food, but their potential." The tallest one nodded and activated what appeared to be a communication device built into the wall. The air above them shimmered, and suddenly Lucy was looking at a 3-dimensional image of space filled with ships and stations, all designed with the flowing organic curves of kitchen implements. A new voice filled the truck, speaking in the same clicking language but somehow translating itself into Lucy's mind. She understood that she was hearing from the Culinary Council, representatives of 12 different species who had discovered that the ability to cook with genuine care and emotion was the foundation of peaceful civilization, the voice explained. That they had been searching Earth for over a century, sampling human food from every culture and region. Most of it was nutritious, some was even delicious, but very little contained the elusive quality they called heart fire. The ability to convey love and comfort through flavor. Most species can feed the body, the voice continued through her 3 companions. Very few can feed the soul. Your macaroni and cheese, simple as it is, contains something we have not encountered in 3,000 years. You cook not just with your hands, but with your heart. You care about the happiness of those who eat your food. Lucy sank onto a stool that materialized beneath her. "But it's just mac and cheese. I learned to make it from a recipe on the back of a box." The smallest creature approached her with its tablet, showing her a new series of images. She saw herself working in the diner, the careful attention she paid to each plate, the way she adjusted seasonings based on the mood of her customers. She saw late-night truckers whose faces brightened at her friendly service, college students who found comfort in her simple meals during difficult times. "You have been practicing the art without knowing it," the tallest one explained, through their mental connection. "Every meal you serve with care strengthens the bond between beings. This is what we seek to preserve and expand throughout the galaxy." The voice from the council continued, explaining that Lucy had passed their preliminary tests. Her food contained the heartfire they were looking for, but to truly join their ranks, she would need to undergo the culinary trial, a test of her ability to cook with unfamiliar ingredients while maintaining the emotional connection that made her food special. "What happens if I pass?" Lucy asked. Images flooded her mind. Vast kitchens on distant worlds, beings from across the galaxy learning to cook with human techniques. Earth becoming a center of culinary learning and cultural exchange. She would be the first human ambassador to the Galactic Culinary Council, pioneering a new era of peaceful contact between species. And if I fail, more images. Her memories of this encounter would be gently removed, and she would return to her normal life with only a vague sense that something interesting had happened. No harm would come to her, but the opportunity would not come again. Lucy looked around the impossible kitchen, at the floating ingredients and the softly glowing equipment. She thought about her grandmother, who had taught her that cooking was an act of love. She thought about the art degree she was struggling to afford, and the painting she dreamed of creating. She thought about the lonely late-night shifts at the diner and the small moments of connection she had found with tired travelers. "How long do I have to decide?" "The trial begins now," the voice said. "But you may change your mind at any point. We will not force this choice upon you." The three creatures moved to different stations around the kitchen, their movements suddenly professional and precise. Lucy realized they weren't children or students at all. They were master chefs, experts in their field who had been evaluating her potential all along. "What are your names?" she asked. "Your real names?" The tallest one paused in its preparations and touched her mind gently. She understood that their names were complex concepts related to flavors and cooking techniques, but they were pleased to be called by the earth names she had given them in her thoughts. "Pepper, Basil, and Sage. Those are perfect, Sage," the smallest one told her through their connection. "They honor both our nature and your understanding of us." Lucy took a deep breath and looked at the ingredients surrounding her. Some glowed with their own light. Others seemed to shift between different states of matter, and a few appeared to be crystallized music or bottled starlight. But underneath the alien nature of the materials, she could sense the familiar challenge of creating something delicious from raw components. "Okay," she said, rolling up her sleeves. "Teach me what I need to know. But I'm warning you, I've never cooked for aliens before." Pepper made that musical trilling sound she had learned was laughter. "You have been cooking for us for weeks. You simply did not know we were alien. The heart fire that matters is the same regardless of the species that receives it." As the trial began, Lucy discovered that cooking with cosmic ingredients wasn't as different from Earth cooking as she had expected. The principles remained the same. Balance flavors, respect the ingredients, and most importantly, cook with the intention of bringing joy to those who would eat the meal. She selected ingredients that called to her instincts, trusting her grandmother's lessons about cooking with love rather than just following recipes. The kitchen responded to her movements, surfaces adjusting their height to accommodate her, tools materializing in her hands as she needed them. For the first time since the strange adventure began, Lucy felt completely at home. This was what she was meant to do. Not just serve food, but create experiences that connected beings across the vast loneliness of space. As she cooked, she began to understand that her simple macaroni and cheese had been the key to unlocking a destiny she never could have imagined. Lucy stared at the floating ingredients around her, each one more impossible than the last. Crystalline fruits that hummed with harmonic frequencies, vegetables that had grown in the zero gravity of space stations, their cells perfectly spherical and filled with nutrients that didn't exist on Earth. Spices that changed color based on the emotional state of whoever touched them. "Where do I even begin?" she asked, reaching tentatively toward a bottle containing what looked like liquid starlight. Basil, the middle-sized creature, approached with its tablet and showed her a series of images. The trial wasn't about creating something completely new. It was about taking the essence of what made her Earth cooking special and adapting it to work with alien ingredients. "Heartfire," Pepper explained through their mental connection. "The technique matters less than the intention. Cook as you would for someone you care about." Lucy closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother's kitchen, filled with the scents of cumin and chili peppers, love expressed through food that nourished both body and spirit. When she opened them again, the alien ingredients seemed less intimidating. Underneath their strange appearances, she could sense familiar qualities: sweetness, acidity, richness, heat. She selected a base that resembled pasta, but was made from something that grew on a moon orbiting a gas giant. The grains were translucent and seemed to store energy from their homeworld's 3 suns. When she cooked them in water that bubbled with natural carbonation, they transformed into something that looked like glass noodles but tasted like the essence of growing things. For the sauce, she chose ingredients that spoke to her instincts rather than her eyes: a creamy substance that came from creatures that lived in methane seas, a cheese-like product that was actually crystallized music from a species that communicated through pure sound, spices that had been aged in the hearts of stars. As she worked, the three creatures moved around her with quiet efficiency, offering tools and adjusting the kitchen's settings to accommodate her earth-trained techniques. Lucy realized they weren't just observing. They were learning from her as much as she was learning from them. "You cook differently than most species," Sage observed, watching Lucy taste the sauce and adjust the seasonings by feel rather than measurement. "Most beings follow precise formulas. You cook with intuition." "My grandmother taught me that recipes are just suggestions," Lucy said, adding a pinch of something that tasted like cinnamon mixed with nostalgia. "Food is about more than nutrition. It's about comfort, memory, love. You can't measure those things." She incorporated techniques from her grandmother's Mexican cooking, building layers of flavor that complemented and enhanced each other. The alien ingredients responded beautifully to Earth methods, as if the fundamental principles of good cooking were universal constants. When she finished, Lucy had created something that looked nothing like macaroni and cheese, but somehow captured its essential spirit. The dish glowed softly with its own light, and the aroma carried hints of home and comfort that transcended planetary boundaries. "Now comes the real test," Pepper said, activating the communication device again. The air shimmered, and suddenly the kitchen was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some appeared as solid holograms, others as swirling clouds of energy, still others as geometric patterns that somehow conveyed personality and presence. All were members of the Culinary Council's regional board, representatives of species that had mastered the art of heartfire cooking. Lucy served portions of her creation to each being, watching nervously as they examined the food with senses she couldn't even imagine. A crystalline entity absorbed the dish directly into its structure, causing rainbow patterns to cascade through its faceted form. A gaseous being enveloped its portion completely, analyzing every molecule before expressing satisfaction through changes in its color spectrum. The most dramatic reaction came from a being that looked like a living tree, its bark rough and ancient, its leaves rustling with what Lucy gradually realized was emotion. When it tasted her food, the creature began to weep, sap flowing down its trunk like tears. "Extraordinary," the tree being said in a voice like wind through forest canopy. "I have not experienced such profound comfort food sensation in 600 years. This human has achieved something remarkable." Other council members shared their reactions. The dish had successfully conveyed the essence of care and nurturing that made Earth comfort food unique, but adapted to work with ingredients from across the galaxy. More importantly, Lucy had done it intuitively, without formal training in cosmic cuisine principles. "The trial is past," announced a being that appeared to be made of living light. "But now we must discuss the implications. Lucy Martinez of Earth, you have demonstrated the Heartfire gift. You are invited to join the Galactic Culinary Council as the first human representative. Do you understand what this means?" Images flooded Lucy's mind again, showing her the scope of what she was being offered. She would spend years traveling between worlds, learning alien cooking techniques and teaching human methods to other species. She would be pioneering humanity's first peaceful contact with galactic civilization, but it would mean leaving behind everything familiar. "I would have to leave Earth," she said quietly. "My family, my studies, my whole life. For a time, yes," the light being confirmed. "The position requires extensive travel and training. You would be gone for approximately 5 Earth years, learning our ways and establishing cooking exchange programs between your world and ours." Lucy thought about her art degree, half-finished and expensive. She thought about her grandmother, who had always encouraged her to follow her dreams even when they seemed impossible. She thought about the late-night shifts at the diner and the small moments of connection she had found in feeding people who needed comfort. "What happens to Earth while I'm gone? Do other humans learn about all this?" "That depends partly on you," Sage explained. "If you accept, we will gradually begin revealing ourselves to select humans who show culinary potential. Your planet would become a training ground and cultural exchange point. If you decline, we will continue our observations but maintain our hidden status." The weight of representing her entire species felt overwhelming. Lucy looked around at the impossible kitchen, at the alien beings waiting for her decision, at Pepper, Basil, and Sage, who had started as mysterious customers and become something like friends. "Can I have some time to think about it?" she asked. Of course, the light being said. 1 Earth week. We will wait for your answer. As the council members faded away, Lucy found herself alone with the 3 creatures who had started this incredible journey. They had removed their hoods completely now, revealing faces that were both alien and oddly beautiful. Their scales caught the kitchen's soft light, and their large amber eyes held expressions of kindness and understanding. Are you afraid? Pepper asked gently. Lucy considered the question honestly. Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. This is the biggest thing that's ever happened to me. Maybe the biggest thing that's ever happened to anyone. How do I know if I'm making the right choice? You don't, Basil said simply. But that is true of all important decisions. We can only choose based on what feels right in our hearts. Lucy looked at the cosmic kitchen around her, then at the simple food truck exterior that disguised it. She thought about her grandmother's lessons and the satisfaction she found in cooking for others. She thought about the lonely truckers at the diner and the way their faces lit up when she served them, something made with care. If I say yes, she said slowly, what's the first thing that happens? You return to your life for 1 week, Sage explained. You think, you prepare, you say goodbye if you choose to join us. Then you begin your training, starting with a tour of nearby culinary worlds to understand what you'll be working with. Lucy nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities and fears. And if I say no, your memories of this experience will be gently removed and you'll return to your normal life. No judgment, no consequences. This choice must be made freely. As they prepared to return her to the diner, Lucy realized that regardless of her final decision, she had already been changed by this experience. She had seen proof that the simple act of cooking with love could bridge differences between beings from different worlds, different species, different forms of existence entirely. The question now was whether she was brave enough to help build those bridges on a galactic scale, or if she would choose the comfort and familiarity of her Earth life. Either choice was valid, but only one would let her explore the incredible possibilities that had opened up before her. Standing in the impossible kitchen, surrounded by friends she never could have imagined, Lucy began to understand what her grandmother had always meant when she said that cooking was about more than food. It was about connecting souls across any distance, whether measured in miles or light years. Lucy returned to her apartment that night with her mind spinning like a blender on high speed. She sat on her small couch, staring at the familiar surroundings that suddenly felt like artifacts from another life. Her easel stood in the corner with a half-finished painting of the desert sunset, brushes dried with paint she hadn't touched in weeks. Her textbooks were scattered across the coffee table, filled with theories about color and composition that seemed trivial compared to cooking with crystallized starlight. She picked up her phone 3 times to call her grandmother, then put it down each time. How could she explain any of this? Even if she left out the alien part, how could she tell her family she was considering abandoning her art degree to become some kind of cosmic chef? The next few days at the diner passed in a haze. Lucy went through the motions of her job, serving coffee and eggs to truckers and late-night wanderers, but part of her mind was always back in that impossible kitchen. Every time she cooked, even simple things like toast or scrambled eggs, she found herself paying attention to details she had never noticed before. The way butter sizzled in the pan, the exact moment when bread transformed from raw dough to golden sustenance, the alchemy of turning basic ingredients into something that could comfort and nourish. Her co-workers noticed the change. You seem different, said Rita, the day shift manager. More focused. Are you taking some kind of cooking class? Something like that, Lucy replied, which was technically true. On Thursday night, she finally drove to her grandmother's house in Phoenix, a small adobe home filled with the scents of cumin and love. Abuela Rosa was in the kitchen, as always, stirring a pot of beans that had been simmering since morning. Mija, her grandmother said without turning around, you look like someone who has seen ghosts. Lucy sat at the familiar kitchen table, worn smooth by generations of family meals. Abuela, if you had a chance to do something amazing, something that could change everything, but it meant leaving everything you know behind, what would you do? Rosa turned from the stove, her weathered hand still holding the wooden spoon. Her dark eyes, sharp despite her 78 years, studied Lucy's face carefully. This is about more than school, isn't it? Much more. Lucy fidgeted with her coffee cup. I can't explain all of it. but I've been offered an opportunity to learn cooking techniques that no human has ever seen before. To represent our family, our culture, maybe our whole planet. But it would mean traveling very far away for several years. Her grandmother sat down across from her, reaching out to take Lucy's hands. When I was your age, I left Mexico with nothing but the recipes my mother taught me. I was terrified, but I knew that food was a language that could speak to anyone, anywhere. If someone is offering to teach you that language on a bigger scale, maybe you should listen. But what about my art degree? What about everything I've worked for? Rosa smiled, the expression creating familiar lines around her eyes. Mija, cooking is art. It's sculpture with ingredients, painting with flavors, music with the rhythm of chopping and stirring. If this opportunity feels right in your heart, your hands will find their way to beauty no matter what form it takes. That night, Lucy lay awake thinking about her grandmother's words. She thought about all the times she had felt most alive and useful. Not in art class struggling with perspective, but in the kitchen creating something that brought joy to others. Her happiest memories were of cooking with Rosa, learning family recipes that carried the history and love of generations. Friday came too quickly. Lucy arrived at work knowing that Pepper, Basil, and Sage would appear at 3 a.m. for her final answer. She had spent the week going back and forth, making lists of pros and cons that never seemed to balance properly. How could she weigh the familiar comfort of Earth against the infinite possibility of the galaxy? The diner was busier than usual, filled with travelers trying to beat an approaching storm. Lucy served plates of comfort food to people seeking shelter from the desert wind, and she found herself really looking at their faces for the first time in months. The tired trucker who smiled when she remembered he liked extra hot sauce. The college student who relaxed visibly when she brought him soup that reminded him of home. The elderly couple who held hands across the table while sharing pie and coffee. Each interaction was a small act of care, a moment of human connection facilitated by food. Lucy realized she had been practicing galactic diplomacy all along, using meals to build bridges between strangers who might otherwise never speak to each other. When the 3 familiar figures entered at exactly 3 o'clock, Lucy was ready for them. They wore their chef's coats again, and their amber eyes held patient understanding. They settled into their usual booth and waited for her to approach. "I have conditions," Lucy said without preamble, sitting down across from them. Pepper tilted its head in the gesture she had learned meant curiosity mixed with respect. "Tell us. I want Earth to be part of this exchange from the beginning. Not just me learning alien techniques, but other humans too. I want cooking schools, cultural programs, ways for both sides to benefit from what we learn from each other." Sage pulled out its tablet and made notes with quick, precise movements. "This can be arranged. What else? I want to be able to come home sometimes, to visit my family, to make sure Earth is being treated fairly in all this, and I want guarantees that humanity gets to choose how much contact we have with galactic civilization. No forced changes, no unwanted interference." "Reasonable requests," Basil said through their mental connection. "The Council prefers gradual integration. Forced contact always leads to problems." Lucy took a deep breath. "And I want to take something with me. Recipes, techniques, ingredients if possible. I want to introduce galactic cuisine to Earth cooking, not just replace one with the other." The 3 creatures exchanged rapid clicks that sounded almost like laughter. "You think like a true culinary diplomat," Pepper said. "These are exactly the kinds of conditions the Council hopes for. You understand that this is about building bridges, not establishing dominance." "So my answer is yes," Lucy said, surprised by how calm she felt now that the decision was made. "I'll join your council. I'll become Earth's first cosmic chef, but I'm doing it my way, with respect for both sides of the exchange." Sage reached across the table and touched her hand gently, sending a brief image of celebration and approval. "When you are ready, we will begin your training. But first, you should say your goodbyes and make your preparations. The ship that will take you to the Council headquarters arrives in 1 week." "A ship?" Lucy asked, suddenly realizing she had never thought about the practical details of interstellar travel. "Don't worry," Basil assured her. "It looks like a traveling food festival. Your neighbors will think you've gotten a job with a catering company that specializes in unusual cuisine, which in a way is exactly what's happening." As they prepared to leave, Pepper handed her a small device that looked like a crystal tablet similar to their own. "This will help you access the basic galactic cooking database. Start learning the fundamental principles of Heartfire cuisine. And don't forget to practice your macaroni and cheese. It's going to be humanity's first official contribution to the Galactic Cookbook. Lucy watched them walk out into the storm, their small figures disappearing into the wind and rain like desert spirits. She looked down at the crystal tablet in her hands, which had already begun displaying images and information in response to her thoughts. For the first time since this incredible journey began, Lucy felt completely certain she was making the right choice. She was scared, excited, overwhelmed, and determined all at once. In 1 week, she would leave Earth to become something that had never existed before. A human ambassador to a civilization built on the universal language of food prepared with love. She spent the rest of her shift planning what she would pack for a journey to the stars, starting with her grandmother's recipe book and ending with dreams of teaching aliens how to make the perfect grilled cheese sandwich. 6 months later, Lucy stood behind the counter of what still appeared to be Tony's Diner, but was now secretly the first Earth branch of the Galactic Culinary Council. To most humans, nothing had changed. The same neon sign buzzed outside, the same coffee maker gurgled in the corner, and the same menu hung on the wall advertising burgers and pie. But Lucy knew better. Hidden behind the familiar facade was equipment that could prepare food for beings who breathed methane, tasted with their feet, or absorbed nutrients directly through their skin. The walk-in freezer now held ingredients from 17 different worlds, carefully disguised to look like ordinary Earth food supplies. She had returned from her initial training with knowledge that would take years to fully understand and abilities she was still learning to control. The crystal tablet Pepper had given her had evolved into something like a universal translator for cooking, helping her adapt recipes across species barriers and understand the emotional resonances of different flavor combinations. Tonight was special. The council had approved her proposal for an experimental exchange program, and the first group of alien culinary students was arriving to learn human cooking techniques. They would appear to other humans as foreign exchange students interested in American cuisine, their true nature hidden by the same technology that disguised the diner's advanced equipment. Lucy checked her reflection in the coffee pot, smoothing down hair that had grown longer during her travels. She wore her usual uniform, but underneath her apron was a chef's coat made from fabric that regulated temperature across a range suitable for multiple species, small changes that made big differences in building bridges between worlds. The bell above the door chimed, and her first student entered. To human eyes, it would appear to be a tall, pale young woman with unusual silver hair, but Lucy saw through the disguise to the crystalline being underneath. A member of the harmony species who communicated through musical tones and experienced flavor as symphonies of sensation. "Welcome to Tony's," Lucy said, both aloud and through the mental connection she had learned to establish. "Ready for your first lesson in comfort food?" The being responded with a musical laugh that sounded like wind chimes. "I am honored to learn from the human who introduced Heartfire to the council. My people are very curious about this concept of chicken soup for the soul." Over the next hour, 5 more students arrived. A gaseous being who maintained human form through considerable effort, fascinated by the concept of solid food that could still convey emotional comfort. A plant-like entity whose species had never developed cooking because they photosynthesized, but who wanted to understand how other species created pleasure from consumption. A mechanical being whose creators had programmed it to optimize nutrition, but who had become curious about the non-logical aspects of cuisine. Lucy began the lesson with the same dish that had started her incredible journey, macaroni and cheese. But now she understood why it had been so significant to Pepper. Basil and sage, the simple combination of pasta, dairy, and seasoning created something greater than the sum of its parts. A perfect example of how basic ingredients could be transformed through technique and intention into pure comfort. "The secret isn't in the recipe," Lucy explained as she demonstrated the proper way to make a roux. "It's in understanding who you're cooking for and what they need. This dish became special because I was making it for beings I cared about, even before I knew who they really were." The students took notes on devices that ranged from crystal tablets to floating data spheres to organic memory pods. But more importantly, they watched how Lucy moved, how she tasted and adjusted, how she seemed to cook with intuition as much as knowledge. "In your travels, You've learned to adapt human techniques for alien biology, the crystalline being observed, but you still cook like a human. How do you maintain that authenticity while expanding beyond your species' limitations? Lucy paused in her stirring, considering the question that went to the heart of her role as an ambassador. I think the authenticity comes from the intention, not the technique. Whether I'm making macaroni and cheese for truck drivers or preparing crystallized emotion fruit for beings who taste with light sensors, I'm still trying to create something that brings comfort and joy. The love is the same, even if the methods change. As the lesson continued, Lucy found herself thinking about how much her life had changed since that first encounter with 3 mysterious customers. She had traveled to worlds where the sky was made of edible crystals and cooking was considered the highest form of art. She had learned to prepare meals for beings whose biology was so different from humans that they might as well have been living abstract concepts, but the most important lesson had come from returning to Earth and seeing her own world through alien eyes. Humans, she had learned, possessed something remarkable, the ability to infuse ordinary food with extraordinary emotional meaning. Other species could create technically perfect dishes, but humans specialized in making meals that felt like hugs from the inside. The dinner rush brought regular human customers, truckers and travelers who had no idea they were eating in an intergalactic cultural exchange center. Lucy served them with the same care she always had, but now she understood that each interaction was a small act of diplomacy, demonstrating human values to beings who were learning to understand Earth culture through its cuisine. Around midnight, when the last human customer had left, the real work began. Lucy's alien students practiced human techniques on ingredients from their homeworlds, creating fusion dishes that had never existed before. The crystalline being learned to make something like grilled cheese using conductive metals and crystallized dairy analogs that sang when heated properly. The plant entity discovered that fermentation could create complexity and flavor that mimicked the satisfaction humans found in comfort food. You're not just teaching us to cook, the mechanical being observed as it carefully measured spices for a dish that would be consumed by uploading the recipe directly into its database. You're teaching us to understand why humans find comfort in ritual and tradition. Lucy smiled, thinking of her grandmother's kitchen and the generations of family recipes that had led to this moment. Food is memory made edible. When I make macaroni and cheese, I'm not just combining pasta and cheese. I'm sharing my childhood, my culture, my grandmother's love passed down through generations. That's what Heartfire really is. The ability to cook your history and emotions into the food so others can taste who you are. Near dawn, as the students prepared to return to their temporary housing, Pepper, Basil, and Sage arrived for their regular visit. They no longer needed to disguise themselves around Lucy, and their true forms moved with the confident grace of master chefs checking on a promising apprentice. The council is pleased with the progress, Pepper reported. 3 more worlds have requested human culinary ambassadors, and 2 species have offered to establish cooking schools on Earth. You've succeeded beyond our initial projections. Lucy looked around the diner that had become her bridge between worlds, at the equipment that could prepare meals for any known form of life, at the students who were learning that the best recipes couldn't be measured in cups and teaspoons but in care and intention. I had good teachers, she said, thinking of her grandmother's lessons and the patient guidance of 3 creatures who had seen potential in a late-night waitress serving simple comfort food. As the sun rose over the Arizona desert, Lucy began preparing for the morning shift. When regular human customers would return for coffee and eggs, never knowing they were dining in the newest branch of a cosmic civilization built on the foundation that good food, prepared with love, could unite any beings, no matter how different they might appear on the surface. She pulled out her grandmother's recipe book, now supplemented with techniques for preparing meals across dimensional barriers and cooking methods that worked in zero gravity. Tomorrow she would teach her alien students how to make scrambled eggs that conveyed the feeling of a perfect Sunday morning. And next week she would demonstrate the art of pancakes to a delegation from a planet where breakfast was considered the most important social ritual. The impossible had become routine, but Lucy never forgot the lesson that had started it all. The simple act of serving food with genuine care could transform strangers into friends, whether they came from the next state over or the next galaxy. In a universe vast beyond imagination, A plate of macaroni and cheese made with love remained one of the most powerful forces for peace and understanding ever discovered.